Calling out with intense emotion, the young woman desperately screams Lord Cyril's name into the darkness. Ravi begs him to remember her, declaring she treasured every single moment together since childhood. Heartbreak washes over her as she realizes those precious memories might mean absolutely nothing to him. The boy flows seamlessly backward, flashing back to a highly fateful day 9 years ago. The terrified young girl trembles in utter fear as a dangerous ordeal begins to unfold outside. Someone gently attempts to comfort the incredibly frightened girl amidst the rising and highly chaotic panic. Her anxious mother desperately urges young Ravi to remain remarkably strong during this horrifying, unexpected crisis. The defeated mother softly suggests accepting their tragic fate together before the vile bandits finally arrive. The terrified child looks on with wide eyes as the intensely bleak reality truly settles in. Refusing to give up, Ravi bravely suggests negotiating with the dangerous robbers instead of merely dying. She cleverly reasons that the greedy attackers only targeted their wealthy carriage for money anyway today. The brilliant girl confidently explains that offering the thieves an even bigger financial payout will work. She cleverly proposes using her father's high status at the Nicholson Trading Company for a ransom. The hesitant mother finally agrees that the greedy bandits might actually avoid any unnecessary physical violence. The proud noblewoman declares she would rather face demise than endure a complete and total humiliation. Rising panic deeply sets in as Ravi realizes she desperately needs a clever plan to survive. Closing her eyes tightly, the highly frightened girl forces her rapidly racing mind to think quickly. A sudden, violent jolt of terror severely shakes the entire carriage as the imminent danger approaches. A piercing scream loudly echoes through the cold air as the brutal ambush finally begins outside. Absolute confusion washes over them while the chaotic struggle violently rages just outside their trembling carriage. Shouts of capture and retreat loudly ring out as an unexpected rescue force arrives on horseback. A sudden glimmer of warm hope strongly sparks in her anxious chest as help finally appears. Immense relief completely washes over the young girl upon realizing their heroic saviors have finally come. A highly gallant knight bravely charges forward into the fray to secure the intensely dangerous battlefield. The brave savior swiftly subdues the remaining threats with practiced and incredibly elegant martial arts precision. With the skirmish resolved, the striking young man slowly approaches the heavily damaged noble carriage outside. He gently opens the heavy door and softly asks if the terrified passengers survive the attack. Ravi simply stares up at her handsome savior in absolute awe and completely breathless romantic wonder. The confident knight warmly reassures the frightened women that all violent bandits are now completely subdued. Overflowing with immense gratitude, she heavily stammers her thanks while he carefully checks for any injuries. Her relieved mother gently nudges Ravi to properly thank the incredibly brave man standing before them. The older Ravi fondly reflects on exactly how deeply she fell for her handsome childhood savior. Back in the present, a joyful voice loudly expresses immense relief for her overall physical safety. Her worried father explains that his intense anxiety left her shocked mother completely and totally bedridden. He happily reveals that he diligently investigated the mysterious rescuer during his recent time away working. He proudly announces that their heroic savior is none other than Lord Cyril Olcott himself today. Ravi repeatedly whispers the wonderful name in her busy mind with a deeply blushing, warm face. She happily daydreams about romantic marriage, strongly wishing she had learned his handsome name much sooner. Filled with sudden regret, she sadly laments fainting right after formally meeting her beloved childhood hero. Assuring her worried father she is completely fine, she proudly decides to stay and support everyone. Ravi eagerly calls out to her father while harboring intense anticipation deep within her beating heart. She urgently asks her father if he is finally going to properly thank Lord Cyril today. Her father cautiously explains that their meeting entirely depends on the busy noble's unpredictable daily schedule. Desperate to go along, she forcefully demands that her father absolutely must take her everywhere together. Stunned by her sudden intensity, her overwhelmed father hesitantly agrees to her completely unexpected fierce demand. Exactly 1 long month peacefully passes before the highly anticipated and incredibly important special day arrives. Ravi internally rejoices because she can finally greet the wonderful Lord Cyril face to face today. Her father gently reminds her that the important person they are meeting is a proper noble. He seriously warns her that many aristocratic nobles unfairly look down upon simple commoner merchant families. Preparing herself for any harsh judgment, Ravi bravely accepts her worried father's incredibly serious protective warning. The grand carriage slowly approaches the magnificent and imposing estate belonging to the wealthy noble family. Stepping forward with nervous anticipation, their elegant polished shoes click softly against the grand stone floor. The massive wooden doors slowly creak open to reveal the completely breathtaking and beautifully opulent interior. Ravi gasps in absolute amazement as she intensely marvels at the incredibly beautiful and grand hall. Acknowledging her own decent home, she admits this spectacular noble household exists on another glorious level. Spotting Lord Cyril in the flesh after a whole month simply sends her into pure joy. As her father respectfully expresses deep gratitude, her wildly racing heart absolutely refuses to ever stop. While her father urges her to properly greet him, she secretly begs for his immediate marriage. Bowing with beautiful grace, the young girl politely introduces herself as the humble Lady Ravi Nicholson. The incredibly handsome Lord Cyril warmly welcomes them and politely invites the anxious guests to sit. Taking a seat carefully, Ravi politely thanks the handsome young lord for his graciously warm hospitality. She happily praises herself for successfully completing the formal greeting without messing up even one time. Secretly admiring their refined elegance, she marvels at how politely they treat simple ordinary commoner merchants. Glancing nervously around the opulent room, she suddenly feels completely and utterly out of place today. Breaking the quiet silence, her father sincerely thanks Lord Cyril once again for saving his family. Smiling warmly at the merchant, Cyril humbly claims that ensuring their safe rescue was merely natural. Watching his charming smile, Ravi fiercely declares her overwhelming love for him deep within her mind. While Ravi admires his absolute perfection, Cyril suddenly mentions hearing about her incredibly sharp natural intelligence. Startled by his sudden question about her skills, she nervously blurts out her complex calculation abilities. The older noble echoes the word calculation while quietly observing the surprisingly bold young merchant girl. Instantly realizing her terrible mistake, Ravi freezes in pure panic over her completely unladylike, unexpected response. Deeply regretting her foolish answer, she intensely wishes she had mentioned elegant embroidery or piano instead. Breaking the awkward tension smoothly, Cyril gently remarks that she must undoubtedly take after her father. Confused by his unexpectedly kind response, Ravi stares at the handsome young noble in utter disbelief. The older noble jokingly reveals that Cyril strongly prefers energetic physical activity over studying any day. Flashing a gentle smile, Cyril smoothly admits he needs to learn from Lady Ravi's brilliant intelligence. Her racing heart violently pounds as she joyfully realizes he is being wonderfully considerate of her. Blushing furiously, she happily concludes that Lord Cyril truly is the most wonderfully perfect man alive. Shifting the topic gently, Cyril worriedly asks if that terrifying bandit encounter caused any lingering nightmares. Startled again, she internally screams that the only thing ever visiting her romantic dreams is him. Modestly admitting he only carries swords during training, he clarifies the guards actually captured the menacing bandits. Completely captivated by his wonderful nature, the starry-eyed girl marvels that Lord Cyril can actually wield swords. Her racing mind excitedly considers the thrilling possibility that he deeply enjoys training with his sharp swords. Brimming with innocent curiosity, she eagerly asks if Lord Cyril plans to become a knight upon adulthood. Suddenly shattering her starry-eyed romantic daydreams, a loud voice sharply calls out Ravi's name from behind her. Startled by the sudden interruption, the deeply flustered girl nervously turns around to face the unexpected noise. Laughing with bright enthusiasm, the charming boy cheerfully agrees that becoming a brave knight might be nice. Leaning in with a gentle smile, he sweetly asks Ravi if she would like to become close friends. Utterly bewildered about befriending a commoner, she stammers in pure shock while he reassuringly confirms his request. Explaining his impending return to boarding school, he promises to send letters while hoping she writes back. Flushing with intense emotional warmth, the deeply surprised young girl gasps softly at his incredibly sweet proposal. An undeniable spark of pure joy blossoms between them as they silently share this beautifully tender moment. Overjoyed by his wonderful offer, she eagerly accepts his friendship with a tremendously bright and radiant smile. Sometime after that heartwarming encounter, an excited messenger gleefully hands a highly anticipated letter directly to Ravi. Trembling with sheer anticipation, she hastily tears open the pristine envelope to reveal its deeply treasured contents. Staring at the paper in absolute awe, she joyfully realizes that Lord Cyril actually kept his promise. The elegant letter cordially addresses Dear Ravi while formally announcing his safe arrival at the royal boarding school. Detailing his new academic environment, he explains that noble children primarily reside within the grand school dormitory. He describes the strict daily schedule and private rooms while warning that slight tardiness earns harsh punishment duties. Expressing a relatable struggle, he cheekily admits how difficult stopping a good book feels after strict lights out. Apologizing for only discussing the boring dormitory, he promises his next letter will explore the vibrant school. Clutching the precious parchment to her chest, she breathlessly whispers Lord Cyril's name with profound romantic affection. Touched by his absolute sincerity, she deeply appreciates how carefully he describes his fascinating new daily routine. Bursting with uncontainable excitement, she joyfully celebrates the absolute certainty of receiving another wonderful letter from him. Filled with sudden determination, the energetic girl happily resolves to write a beautifully detailed reply to him. Grabbing her finest writing supplies, she diligently begins crafting her thoughtful response with tremendous care and focus. Expressing her immense gratitude, she begins her sweet letter by properly thanking dear Lord Cyril for writing. Explaining a funny mishap, she admits her joy caused her to accidentally crumple his letter while sleeping. Wanting to properly protect important items, she decides to safely store his precious letter inside her drawer. Listing her drawer's treasures, she bizarrely includes shiny seashells alongside a distinctly month-old pastry from the capital. Bravely offering her fiercely loyal protection, she valiantly promises to decisively defeat any spooky dormitory ghosts for him. Reading her highly enthusiastic threat toward ghosts, the young noble quietly mutters the aggressive phrase in disbelief. A completely bewildered expression crosses his handsome face as he mentally processes her incredibly odd little threat. Chuckling softly at her endearing response, he affectionately remarks on the surprising bravery of his spirited pen pal. Deeply concerned about food safety, he sensibly decides to urgently instruct her to throw away that ancient pastry. Expressing sheer amusement at her engaging reply, he kindly requests she surrender that dangerously stale pastry to adults. Promising a much safer alternative, the generous boy offers to mail her freshly baked sweets from the capital. Modestly admitting his total lack of confectionery knowledge, he notes these specific treats are incredibly popular with girls. Thrilled by the wonderful sweets, Ravi joyfully celebrates his thoughtful gift while someone asks her to dispose something. Miserably recounting her tragic fate, the devastated girl painfully reveals her mother harshly scolded her for hoarding food. Realizing Lord Cyril was completely right, she anxiously concludes that the mysterious situation is actually quite bad. Tasting the delicious treat, she happily understands exactly why it is so incredibly popular among capital girls. A sudden wave of intense shock completely overtakes her as the specific mention of girls heavily lingers. Confusion deeply sets in as she suddenly remembers that his prestigious boarding school should only contain boys. Overwhelmed by sudden jealousy, she loudly questions exactly which mysterious girls Lord Cyril is actually talking about. Penning a very grateful letter, she sweetly compliments Lord Cyril on his unexpectedly beautiful drawing and writing. She innocently praises his incredibly cute tadpole drawing while remaining completely unaware it was actually a cat. Blushing deeply as she finishes her note, she boldly asks exactly what kind of girl he likes. Lord Cyril replies warmly to Ravi, playfully admitting his embarrassing mistake because the drawing was a cat. He expresses immense relief that she truly enjoyed the sweets before nervously addressing her highly personal question. Confessing that he thinks all girls are cute, he gently notes that engagement feels much too early. Sprinting urgently through the grand halls, the determined young girl loudly calls out for her busy father. Startling her deeply confused father, Ravi desperately shoves the revealing letter directly into his highly surprised hands. Her father completely misses the real point while simply praising Lord Cyril as a very kind youth. He laughingly critiques her silly mistake about the tadpole drawing while she angrily insists that means nothing. Frustrated by his utter distraction, Ravi furiously points directly to the terrifying sentence about his friend's engagements. Panic completely overtakes her mind as she desperately wonders how she can swiftly become Lord Cyril's fiancée. She refuses to simply sit back and watch helplessly while he potentially marries another incredibly wealthy woman. Staring closely at his highly agitated daughter, the father realizes his quiet suspicions were actually entirely correct. Watching her furiously stomp her feet, he finally asks if she truly loves Lord Cyril romantically now. She passionately declares that she has been constantly working incredibly hard to become his loving future wife. Sighing with heavy regret, her father sadly admits that he completely failed to explain the harsh reality. Looking very serious, he gently reminds his highly ambitious daughter that she is merely a humble commoner. He firmly explains that the massive gap in their overall social standing will create an impossible barrier. Shocking him deeply, she loudly demands he use his massive wealth to completely fix her romantic problem. Clearing his throat awkwardly, he rapidly insists that his own past romance was completely and totally different. He carefully clarifies that her mother became a commoner before marrying him while Cyril remains an heir. Continuing his stern lecture, he reveals that one highly specific societal exception makes her romantic dream impossible. The devastating realization heavily hits her as her solemn father confirms that this union is absolutely impossible. He definitively states that a formal marriage between a noble heir and a lowly commoner is forbidden. Crushing her hopes further, he explains that buying noble status later will never actually change this rule. Delivering the final painful blow, he sternly reminds her that the kingdom completely enforces this strict law. Absolute silence completely fills the large room as the truly devastating heartbreak slowly washes over young Ravi. Reflecting on her massive disappointment, he gently acknowledges her very strong feelings while noting her impulsive nature. He softly admits he previously mistook her deeply genuine romantic feelings for a highly simple childhood crush. Noticing her sudden and highly unexpected stillness, he calls out to his eerily silent daughter with concern. Instead of crying sadly, a completely fierce and highly determined light suddenly sparks within her wide eyes. Startling her worried father immensely, she proudly shouts that a totally brilliant idea just struck her mind. She rapidly calculates that her mother's hidden noble bloodline could easily provide a clever and powerful loophole. The narrative immediately crushes her brilliant plan by clearly stating a completely renounced noble title is lost. She quickly realizes pretending to be a noble's secret child will strictly lead to absolute rejection. Experiencing this sharp rejection, she painfully learns the absolute harshness of cruel reality for the very first time. Weeping silently, she feels utterly crushed by the highly immovable and entirely unforgiving wall of social class. Sitting alone in utter silence, she helplessly ponders her completely overwhelming and deeply sorrowful emotional pain. Her father loudly calls out her name, trying to gently pull her out of her deeply melancholic thoughts. Still looking slightly downcast, she softly asks her loving father what he wants to discuss right now. He kindly asks if she is still feeling down since terrible heartbreak simply does not heal very quickly. Assuring her he brings wonderful news, he completely grabs her full attention as she curiously asks what it is. Her father excitedly announces the absolutely thrilling news that Lord Cyril is coming to visit their lovely home. He explains the nobles allowed it because their highly respectable home offers perfectly tight security for the precious guests. Overjoyed by the absolute amazing news, Ravi cheerfully declares her immense love for her sweetly smiling father. Exactly 3 beautifully warm months later, an elegant and grand carriage peacefully arrives right at their lovely estate. Stepping out with remarkable grace, Cyril politely notes that it has certainly been quite a long while. Her father warmly greets the young lord while deeply thanking him very much for visiting their humble home. Cyril politely thanks him back, happily anticipating that this wonderful long break will be highly enjoyable this year. Catching sight of the incredibly handsome young lord, Ravi gasps while a deep blush quickly warms her cheeks. Cyril smiles gently at the blushing young girl, warmly expressing his genuine happiness to see her once again. Beaming with absolute joy, Ravi enthusiastically replies that she is truly incredibly happy to see him as well. Following that highly emotional reunion, Ravi and the charming Lord Cyril enjoyed doing many wonderfully fun things together. They happily spend their perfectly quiet time reading highly fascinating books together in the vast and peaceful library. Enjoying the lovely weather outdoors, they peacefully share a wonderful picnic under the highly bright and warming sun. They playfully run together through the highly expansive and beautifully maintained estate grounds while sharing joyful endless laughter. Seeking a brief escape, they sneakily hide behind a large wall together to completely avoid unwanted prying eyes. A highly confused maid frantically searches the quiet hallway, completely failing to spot the hidden young noble pair. After the maid finally leaves, Cyril gently taps Ravi on the shoulder twice to carefully signal complete safety. Ravi smiles brightly while leaning against the cool wall, feeling completely reassured by his highly gentle physical touch. They successfully sneak completely out of the estate while quietly sharing a deeply thrilling moment of pure innocent mischief. Walking happily together, They explore the absolutely gorgeous sunlit town while deeply enjoying their perfectly wonderful secret escape. Suddenly spotting someone approaching, Cyril quickly taps his foot twice on the floor to silently signal high alertness. She proudly explains that 2 shoulder taps allow movement while 2 quick foot taps demand absolute and strict alertness. She happily cherishes the amazing fact that these entirely secret signals exist strictly between her and Lord Cyril. Enthusiastically leading the way forward, Ravi eagerly gestures for Lord Cyril to quickly follow her toward something special. Looking over the magnificent landscape, Cyril audibly gasps while taking in the completely and utterly breathtaking beautiful view. Agreeing with his immense awe, she proudly confirms that this remarkably magnificent view is her very special secret place. She playfully promises that sharing this incredibly beautiful hidden location will strictly remain another wonderful secret just between them. Blushing incredibly softly, Cyril sincerely thanks the young girl for graciously showing him such a remarkably stunning location. Cyril heavily praises the remarkably beautiful town, noting that the deeply fair local lord clearly governs it very well. Turning to him with deep curiosity, Ravi quickly asks if his own father governs his territory exactly the same. Cyril quickly agrees that his highly strict father would absolutely never dare be cruel to any of his people. Sighing softly, he suddenly admits the truly troubling part is his father's incredibly strong and highly unwavering personal pride. He sadly wishes his deeply stubborn father would listen more instead of merely treating his family as fragile objects. Realizing he awkwardly overshared his private thoughts, Cyril suddenly pauses his quiet rambling complaint with a sharply brief gasp. He quickly apologizes for the unexpected rambling outburst while nervously insisting that it is truly nothing important to discuss. Seeking to completely comfort him, Ravi quickly shares her father's wisdom that merely criticizing others completely prevents personal growth. She cleverly quotes her father, explaining one must carefully analyze errors, seek improvements, and confidently decide their own actions. Smiling incredibly warmly, she confidently assures the young man that deeply understanding both sides will definitely make him splendid. Deeply touched by her remarkable wisdom, Cyril softly thanks Ravi for her incredibly encouraging and deeply reassuring kind words. Feeling fully inspired, he completely agrees that knowing exactly where problems lie will directly allow him to fix them. He promises to work incredibly hard so his beloved people can ultimately live highly peaceful and perfectly safe lives. Checking the rapidly passing time, Cyril cheerfully suggests they should quickly head back since it is almost lunchtime already. Walking closely beside him, Ravi purely realizes that seeing Lord Cyril smile completely fills her heart with absolute happiness. She smiles incredibly sweetly at him while fiercely cherishing this remarkably beautiful and truly unforgettable shared moment in time. Glowing with absolute internal joy, she deeply wishes these completely perfect moments together could somehow magically last forever. The remarkably warm sun shines highly bright as they peacefully walk together down the perfectly quiet and charming street. Tragically, exactly 2 years later, Lord Cyril's father passed away, suddenly forcing the 2 dear friends to separate completely. Looking deeply melancholic and sad, Ravi solemnly reflects that her perfectly precious second wish ultimately remained entirely unfulfilled. Rain violently pours down upon the gloomy estate as a deep sense of somber tragedy unfolds. Collapsing in pure agony, a devastated woman tearfully screams and desperately asks why her beloved left them. Whispering softly, concerned onlookers cautiously spread sorrowful rumors about the deceased taking his life over massive debts. Standing nearby, a deeply selfish bystander merely hopes this terrible tragedy will not affect their own family. Discussing the surviving family, cruel relatives quietly agree they absolutely cannot take care of the 2 orphans. Selfish murmurs completely fill the heavy air as distant relatives complain about this highly troublesome financial situation. Staring ahead in pure disbelief, young Ravi tightly grips her trembling hands upon hearing the devastating news. Her deeply troubled father paces nervously while questioning exactly why Count Olcott would commit such an act. He solemnly explains that the desperate Count failed a major investment and borrowed from extremely dangerous people. Sighing heavily, he reveals that the growing debts will tragically cost the fallen noble his entire estate. The sorrowful man deeply regrets that the proud noble completely refused to borrow money from a commoner. Glancing downwards with intense sorrow, he quietly wishes the stubborn noble had simply listened to others more. Clutching her father tightly, an incredibly anxious Ravi begs to know what will happen to Lord Cyril. Gently shaking his head, he sadly explains that the proud family firmly rejected their helpful messenger yesterday. He softly reminds his devastated daughter that a commoner helping a noble remains strictly and unfortunately forbidden. Hearing this harsh reality, the deeply heartbroken girl sadly lowers her tearful eyes in complete and utter defeat. Sitting completely alone inside her quiet room, the heavily depressed young girl lets out a deeply sorrowful sigh. Staring outside, she mournfully realizes that Lord Cyril would be arriving soon if things had not gone wrong. A gentle knock suddenly interrupts her deep thoughts as she quietly welcomes her concerned brother inside today. Peeking carefully through the open doorway, her young brother softly asks if his beloved sister feels all right. Forcing a gentle smile, she warmly thanks kind Andy while falsely insisting that she feels completely fine. The concerned boy firmly states his worry while mentioning she has barely eaten anything over the past days. Reaching out gently, she affectionately praises his sweet kindness and promises him once again that she is fine. Trying to ease his worried mind, she decides to take a highly refreshing walk in the blooming garden. Stepping out into the gentle breeze, she slowly wanders through the massive estate grounds searching for some peace. The beautiful flowers bloom wonderfully under the bright sun as she silently attempts to completely clear her head. Feeling immensely guilty for worrying her family, she suddenly remembers her sweet brother offering delicious berry pie earlier. Kneeling quietly before a peaceful garden statue, she tightly clasps her trembling hands together in desperate, silent prayer. Her tiny fingers interlock firmly as she intensely surrenders her deeply hurting heart to the divine heavens above. Tears well up rapidly within her beautiful eyes while she begins pleading intensely for a sudden, divine miracle. Whispering softly into the empty wind, she desperately begs God to carefully listen to her highly sorrowful pleas. Swearing to abandon all selfish desires, she frantically prays that Cyril will absolutely never suffer any more hardships. Sobbing heavily, she selflessly surrenders her romantic dreams of marriage just to see him truly smile once again. Continuing her deeply emotional breakdown, she hopelessly begs the silent heavens to miraculously grant just one single wish. Huge teardrops fall rapidly upon the warm grass as she completely breaks down in absolute and utter despair. Releasing a loud and completely heartbroken wail, she furiously accuses God of being incredibly unfair to her love. Suddenly piercing through her loud sobs, a highly familiar masculine voice unexpectedly calls out her name from behind. Gasping loudly in pure shock, the tearful young girl rapidly turns around with intensely widened and deeply surprised eyes. Standing right before her teary eyes, the highly exhausted young noble looks deeply worn down but entirely safe. Calling out his beloved name softly, she gazes up at the magnificent Lord Cyril with pure, overwhelmed joy. Screaming his name with sheer desperation, the young girl completely shatters the heavy silence surrounding them. Apologizing for arriving unannounced, he gratefully notes that the kind Nicholson gatekeepers let him pass without blame. Trembling visibly before her, the deeply exhausted boy sincerely apologizes for being completely unable to send letters. Staring intently with somber eyes, he quietly asks if she has already heard about the tragic events. Confirming the terrible news, she nervously observes that the young noble looks incredibly drained and absolutely exhausted. Speaking with a heavy sigh, he solemnly reveals they are permanently relocating to his mother's family home. He solemnly explains that extreme distance forced him to insist on stopping by for one final farewell. Struggling deeply with the devastating reality, the heartbroken girl desperately asks if she can do anything helpful. Offering her entire saved allowance, she frantically wonders if the money could somehow help his terrible situation. Instantly rejecting the sweet offer, he firmly instructs the tearful girl to keep her allowance for herself. He solemnly explains that wealth can completely destroy people while noting his father ruined himself over finances. Assuring her that everything is fine, he gently warns her against lending personal wealth away so easily. Resolving to stay strong while his mother continuously weeps, he sadly recounts how bad people deceive them. Calling out his noble name with pure sympathy, the young girl gazes lovingly into his tragic eyes. Burning with sudden righteous fury, she loudly demands to know the terrible culprits so she can fight. Vowing to fiercely return his previous heroic favor, she promises to completely protect him from any danger. Pointing forcefully into the empty air, the brave commoner angrily vows to bring ultimate justice upon thieves. Struck by a seemingly brilliant idea, she proudly declares she will completely take over her father's company. She gleefully schemes to hire terrifying mercenaries just to ruthlessly punish the bad guys for their crimes. Laughing wickedly while imagining violent retribution, she vividly describes absolutely crushing their enemies one by one forever. Surprised by her incredibly intense violent outburst, he nervously thanks her while insisting everything is completely fine. Expressing deep concern for her gentle soul, he softly insists she should never think about such horrors. Looking tenderly into her wide eyes, he earnestly admits he wants her to remain perfectly innocent forever. A profoundly deep silence warmly settles between them as his incredibly heartfelt confession heavily lingers in the air. Offering one final melancholy farewell, the fallen noble softly wishes her absolute well-being before finally turning away. Transitioning years into the distant future, the painful memory of their sorrowful parting slowly fades into history. A new acquaintance lazily asks exactly how many times the dramatic girl will recount her tragic heartbreak. Unfazed by the heavy annoyance, she boldly claims her friend never actually tires of the romantic saga. The exhausted friend gently notes that 2 incredibly long years have already passed since she first arrived. Narrating her tragic past, she explains losing her sickly mother before learning strict etiquette at 15 years. She proudly reveals that Lady Claire recently celebrated her grand wedding and officially became a highly respected viscountess. Becoming incredibly emotional, she tearfully rejoices that the formerly frail lady completely recovered and got beautifully married. The grateful companion expresses profound joy that the healthy lady no longer needs to drink dragon blood. Lady Claire admits feeling deeply uneasy about having her generous father prepare extremely rare expensive medicine. Laughing brightly, the beautiful lady dramatically complains about the absolutely atrocious taste of the incredibly expensive potion. Shifting the light-hearted conversation completely, the curious noblewoman gently asks if Ravi still harbors deep romantic feelings. Offering her powerful newfound influence, the caring friend eagerly promises to help uncover any heavily hidden information. Smiling with profound sadness, the mature woman softly rejects the generous offer while insisting everything remains fine. She mournfully admits that gaining new knowledge remains entirely useless because changing fate is simply impossible. Swiftly shifting her heavy thoughts away, she fondly remembers exactly how incredibly wonderful Lady Claire looked today. Teasingly asking if she is still thinking about it, he notes the ceremony was 3 months ago. Enthusiastically defending her dreamy captivation, she playfully reminds her father that wonderful things are endlessly enchanting. Feeling slightly dismissed by his sudden bluntness, she quietly pouts while he casually praises the grand castle. Gazing silently out the wooden carriage window together, the father and daughter marvel at the towering castle. Reflecting deeply on changing times, he proudly marvels that commoner merchants can now pass through royal gates. Acknowledging the shifting social dynamics, she notes that nobles can no longer ignore the rising powerful commoners. Looking warmly at his thoughtful daughter, the proud father remarks that the Nicholson Trading Company has grown. Explaining their widespread success across all households, he worries that excessive growth might give Andy a hard time. Questioning his sudden concern, she carefully listens as he reassures her that the child is incredibly practical. Changing the subject completely, the gentle father suggests that 17-year-old Ravi should start seriously thinking about marriage. Caught completely off guard by the sudden marriage talk, the young girl blushes deeply in stunned silence. Observing her heavily flustered reaction, the affectionate father simply smiles warmly without pushing the delicate subject further. Stepping gracefully out of the carriage, the father instructs Ravi to tour the royal castle during his greetings. Promising to pick her up later, he strictly warns the young girl not to get lost inside. Beaming with bright enthusiasm, the cheerful girl happily agrees to his sensible instructions with a confident smile. Wandering through the grand courtyards alone, Ravi suddenly stops and curiously wonders about an unexpected distant sight. Noticing a large crowd forming nearby, she observes several excited noble ladies gathering closely around a courtyard. Realizing it is the night training ground, she eagerly decides to take a quick look around herself. Approaching the bustling training area enthusiastically, she cheerfully thinks this unique experience will make a great story. Listening to the swooning crowd, she hears the excited ladies loudly praising the truly splendid royal knights. The deeply infatuated noblewomen continue gossiping happily, loudly debating whether Lord Jeff or Lord Rick is better. Down on the dusty training field, the commanding knight firmly announces that they should wrap up practice. Trembling with intense anticipation, the eager ladies excitedly prepare to call out as the handsome knights approach. Gazing at the impressive noble sons, Ravi quietly admits that the royal knights are undeniably very handsome. Suddenly breaking through the murmuring crowd, an incredibly excited voice urgently tells absolutely everyone to look over. A massive wave of thrilled whispers sweeps through the gathered ladies as the legendary cold night arrives. The swooning onlookers deeply admire his cool expression, loudly insisting that his icy demeanor makes him appealing. Desperate for his fleeting attention, one deeply enamored lady passionately declares her burning desire to get closer. Hearing that incredibly familiar name, Ravi freezes completely in place while her pounding heart races wildly inside. Overwhelmed by rushing memories, she deeply reflects on the very important person she has never once forgotten. Staring sadly at his incredibly distant figure, she painfully reminds herself that she must completely give up. Clenching her trembling hands tightly together, the heartbroken girl silently repeats that she knows the painful truth. Pushing forcefully through the massive crowd of noble women, Ravi desperately sprints forward with overwhelming and uncontrollable emotion. Tears streaming down her beautiful face, she loudly screams Lord Cyril's name across the crowded training courtyard. Hearing the desperate and sudden shout, the silver-haired knight turns his cold and striking gaze toward her. Stopping abruptly in her hurried tracks, the breathless young girl stares up at his intimidatingly handsome face. Gasping frantically for much-needed air, she desperately introduces herself as Ravi while praying he remembers their connection. Glaring down at the hopeful girl, the incredibly cold knight cruelly demands to know who she is. Ravi timidly approaches Lord Cyril, realizing her first love has tragically transformed into a cold night. Turning slightly, the imposing knight stares downward with an incredibly icy and completely unreadable facial expression. He coldly declares that having a complete stranger suddenly call his noble name is intensely unpleasant. The devastatingly harsh words violently pierce her fragile heart, leaving the young woman completely stunned today. Without a single backward glance, the towering knight turns away and slowly strides down the corridor. Left entirely alone in the massive hallway, a deep sense of crushing sorrow completely overwhelms her. Meanwhile, the grand royal castle stands silently under the vast sky as the warm afternoon passes. Returning home later, her younger brother cheerfully welcomes her back and eagerly asks about the castle. She stands completely frozen in the doorway, uttering a tiny sigh as profound emotional exhaustion hits. Tightly clenching her trembling hands, she desperately tries to hold back the rapidly swelling emotional tears. Noticing her sudden and highly unusual silence, her deeply concerned brother softly questions her troubled demeanor. Unable to contain the heavy sorrow any longer, her brave facade rapidly begins to crumble completely. Collapsing onto the wooden floor, she suddenly bursts into loud, completely uncontrollable wails of absolute misery. She frantically denies anything bad happened while her deeply worried brother carefully questions her sudden outburst. He gently urges her to completely calm down and thoroughly explain exactly what caused such sadness. Sniffling loudly, the heartbroken young woman slowly attempts to explain the absolutely devastating romantic encounter today. Her perceptive brother quickly realizes that Lord Cyril entirely failed to recognize her despite their past. A heavy aura of profound gloom deeply surrounds her as the painful memory violently resurfaces again. She sadly admits that his incredibly harsh and totally unexpected coldness was indeed an intense shock. She tearfully reveals that realizing their shared memories meant absolutely nothing to him truly hurts most. Clutching her chest softly, she warmly recalls how incredibly beautiful and highly precious their time was. Heartbreak deeply washes over her upon realizing those golden days were apparently entirely forgotten by him. Her clever brother dramatically wonders how anyone could possibly easily forget someone as incredibly unique today. He seriously deduces that something must be deeply wrong with the confused knight's overall mental state. He cleverly suggests a highly traumatic event might have completely erased his precious childhood memories forever. Remembering the past, she fondly notes how the previously cheerful young boy used to laugh loudly. A sudden wave of intense guilt completely washes over her as a terrible new realization hits. She loudly berates herself for selfishly focusing entirely on her own painful heartbreak this entire time. Recognizing the tragic truth, she desperately admits that his highly troubled life was clearly not peaceful. The painful narrative heavily reflects on how entirely powerless she was to help him previously today. She sorrowfully remembers being just a highly powerless merchant child completely unable to change the tragedy. Finding pure inner strength, she fondly recalls praying desperately every single day for his beautiful smile. A completely fierce and intensely determined light suddenly sparks brightly within her beautiful and wide eyes. Brushing away her heavy tears, the completely reinvigorated young woman proudly stands up with absolute resolve. She softly calls out her highly supportive brother's name with an incredibly serious and steady voice. Bursting with sudden fiery confidence, she fiercely declares her bold intention to meet Lord Cyril again. She confidently hopes that this specific time she might finally be able to actually help him. Her highly excited younger brother cheers loudly, completely supporting his beloved sister's incredibly brave new plan. Switching scenes rapidly, someone curiously asks why they boldly visited during the massive royal public exercise. She flatly claims the castle's beauty entirely struck her while cleverly trying to hide real motives. Acknowledging the highly terrifying situation, he firmly insists on striving intensely in important daily sales activities. Urging immediate action to avoid severe trouble, someone frantically suggests applying quickly despite various complicated procedures. Whining loudly, she aggressively insists the event must happen on that specific day because of a revelation. An entire month passes quickly as the highly anticipated day of the grand event finally arrives. Racing excitedly across the sprawling estate, the deeply determined girl swiftly prepares for her secret mission. Glancing back nervously, she urgently adjusts her lovely dress while rushing desperately toward the massive gates. Shouting a quick apology to her startled father, she recklessly sprints away without any sudden hesitation. Sprinting rapidly into the distance, she wildly promises to completely explain everything on her way back. Bursting onto the training grounds, she stops abruptly while intensely searching the massive busy outdoor area. Catching sight of her beloved hero, she excitedly repeats Lord Cyril's name with absolute pure joy. Gasping in absolute awe, she wildly clenches her fists while staring at the incredibly handsome noble. Marveling at his deeply striking appearance, she enthusiastically praises his wonderfully magnificent and truly heroic presence. She completely swoons while observing how incredibly dignified and brilliantly sparkling his highly muscular form appears. Intensely watching him swing a wooden sword, she marvels at his completely flawless and graceful swordsmanship. Noticing his suddenly stern facial expression, she worriedly wonders if the handsome young lord feels fatigued. Watching the highly severe training session, she suddenly deeply regrets arriving there completely empty-handed earlier today. An unknown voice praises her enthusiasm while she internally panics about failing to prepare proper refreshments. Whirling around in sheer terror, she nervously faces the highly intimidating older man standing right there. The mysterious older gentleman curiously asks which noble family she represents since he cannot recognize her. Introducing herself loudly as Ravi Nicholson, she internally panics while assuming he thinks she is suspicious. The perplexed gentleman politely requests her father's title while freely admitting he completely forgets that name. Apologizing deeply, she awkwardly explains her father is merely a commoner acting as a company chairman. Sighing with sudden absolute realization, the older gentleman happily acknowledges instantly recognizing the famous Nicholson name. Smiling highly gently, he curiously asks if the young girl personally knows someone within these grounds. Trembling nervously, she slowly admits having an old acquaintance while anxiously wondering if she remains suspicious. She sadly admits they last met 7 years ago and assumes he completely forgets about her. Nodding with quiet understanding, the older man carefully analyzes the deeply sorrowful young lady standing nearby. Shocked by his sharp intuition, she nervously asks how he magically knew that person was Cyril. Chuckling softly, he clearly explains that her highly intense gaze remains completely locked only on Cyril. Flushing with massive embarrassment, she dramatically cowers while the man cheerfully ponders this secret old acquaintance. Observing her completely panicked reaction, the highly amused gentleman silently crafts a wonderfully brilliant matchmaking plan. Smiling warmly, the mysterious noble graciously offers to boldly create an opportunity for her to speak. Startled by this highly unexpected and incredibly generous proposal, the completely confused girl wildly gasps aloud. Grabbing her arm quickly, he loudly announces the exercise is finishing while eagerly dragging her away. Stumbling awkwardly behind the rushing older man, she frantically tries matching his incredibly fast walking pace. They swiftly navigate through the massive grand estate while the highly determined man guides her forward. Stopping abruptly outside a highly grand structure, the cheerful older gentleman loudly announces their final arrival. Staring nervously at the highly intimidating environment, she gulps nervously while preparing for her upcoming reunion. Looking completely utterly bewildered, she quietly stammers while nervously asking exactly where they have finally arrived. A startled voice loudly questions their incredibly unexpected arrival at the prestigious Royal Night Station. A nervous girl anxiously questions if a simple commoner is truly acceptable in this elite place. Attempting to casually escape the overwhelming situation, the flustered commoner declares her immediate intention to leave. Suddenly cutting off her escape route, someone firmly announces that the valiant knights have returned. The atmosphere abruptly shifts as intense gazes lock in a moment of completely stunned silence. Mumbling confusedly to herself in sheer disbelief, she frantically tries to process the shocking encounter. An incredibly authoritative voice sternly demands to know why a civilian is wandering around here. Turning sharply toward his superior, the stern knight angrily questions the commander about this situation. The surprised commander momentarily flinches as the unexpectedly fierce questioning immediately catches him off guard. Waving his hand dismissively, the carefree man humorously admits he is merely the commander in title. He lazily points out that the burdened vice commander actually manages all the daily operations. Introducing himself grandly as Prince Elliot, he explains that royal family members always lead knights. Realizing she is casually walking beside royalty, the terrified girl finally understands everyone's shocked reactions. Ignoring the exhausted sighs of his men, Elliot cheerfully confesses he approached a cute girl. Dramatically revealing her identity, the playful prince excitedly announces she belongs to the trading company. Claiming she desperately wanted to promote her business, the manipulative prince joyfully explains his motives. Leaning in with an incredibly mischievous grin, the cunning prince casually calls out Ravi's name. Offering a rare opportunity, he promises unlimited station access if she successfully conducts her business. Giving her a gentle but forceful push, the prince highly encourages the trembling girl forward. Completely overwhelmed by the massive pressure, Ravi internally panics about suddenly conducting a business negotiation. Feeling entirely unqualified for this tremendous task, she nervously remembers being a lowly new employee. Knowing the Nicholson name is involved, she anxiously realizes their company never handles any weapons. Trapped between fleeing and risking her company's future, her racing mind desperately searches for merchandise. Swaying unsteadily on her feet under the immense pressure, the overwhelmed girl feels incredibly dizzy. Letting out a shaky and breathless gasp, she tries desperately to regain her crumbling composure. Glancing up nervously through her messy hair, she suddenly notices the handsome knight watching silently. A profound sense of deep embarrassment washes over her upon realizing her incredibly awkward situation. Mortified by his intense gaze, she frantically laments showing such a truly pathetic figure here. Slapping her own cheeks to snap out of it, the determined girl aggressively rejects weakness. Steeling her shaking nerves with newfound courage, she stands tall and prepares for the challenge. Boldly declaring her noble merchant lineage, Ravi fiercely begins her highly determined and courageous pitch.